I've never been a cleric. What is it like to lie to children for a living and tell them that they have an authority that they must love, compulsory love, what a grotesque idea, and be terrified of at the same time? What's that like, I want to know? And that we don't have an innate sense of right and wrong. The children don't have an innate sense of fairness and decency, which of course they do. What is it like? I can personalize it to this extent. My mother's Jewish ancestors are told that until they got to Sinai, they'd been dragging themselves around the desert under the impression that adultery, murder, theft, and perjury were all fine. They get to Mount Sinai only to be told it's not kosher after all. I'm sorry. Excuse me. We must have more self-respect than that for us, for ourselves, and for others. Of course, the stories are fiction. It's a fabrication exposed conclusively by Israeli archaeology. Nothing of the sort ever took place, but suppose we take the metaphor. It's an insult. It's an insult to us. It's an insult to our deepest integrity. No, if we'd believed that perjury, murder, and theft were all right, we wouldn't have got as far as the foot of Mount Sinai or anywhere else. Now we're told what we have to believe. And this is coming now to the question of whether or not science, reason, and religion are compatible, or I would rather say reconcilable.
The atheist proposition is the following. Most of the time, it may not be said that there is no God. It may be said that there is no reason to think that there is one. That was the situation after Lucretius and Democritus and the original anti-theistic thinkers began their critique of religion. And I would just ask you all, ladies and gentlemen, to bear in mind a mild distinction while we go on. You may wish to be a deist, as my heroes Thomas Jefferson and Thomas Paine were, and you may not wish to abandon the idea that there must be some sort of first or proximate cause or prime mover of the known and observable world and universe. But even if you can get yourself to that position, which we unbelievers maintain is always subject to better and more perfect and more elegant explanations, even if you can get yourself to that position, all your work is still ahead of you. To go from being a deist to a theist, in other words, from someone who says, God cares about you, knows who you are, minds what you do, answers your prayers, cares which bits of your penis or clitoris you saw away or have sawn away for you, minds who you go to bed with and in what way, minds what holy days you observe, minds what you eat, minds what positions you use for pleasure. All your work is still ahead of you, and lots of luck. Because there's nobody, even Aquinas had to give it up. There's no one who can move from the first position to the second. So I could, and I'm actually strongly tempted to, I could leave it right there. But then it's not in my nature to let off a captive audience so easily.
For 100,000 years, Homo sapiens was born, usually, well, not usually, but very often dying in the process or killing its mother in the process. Life expectancy probably not much more than 20, 25 years. Dying probably of the teeth after that, very agonizingly, near to the brain as they are, or of hunger, or of microorganisms that they didn't know existed, or of events such as volcanic or tsunami or earthquake types that would have been wholly terrifying and mysterious, as well as some turf wars over women, land, property, food, other matters. So you can fill in, imagine it for yourself. Heaven watches this with folded arms for 98,000 years, and then decides it's time to intervene. And the best way of doing that would be a human sacrifice in primitive Palestine, where the news would take so long to spread that it still hasn't penetrated very large parts of the world. And that would be our redemption of the human species. Now, I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, that that is what I've just said, which you must believe to believe the Christian revelation, is not possible to believe, as well as not decent to believe. Why is it not possible? Because a virgin birth is more likely than that. A resurrection is more likely than that. And because if it was true, it would have two further implications. It would have to mean that the designer of this plan was unbelievably lazy and inept, or unbelievably callous and cruel and indifferent and capricious. And that is the case with every argument for design and every argument for revelation and intervention that has ever been made. But it's now conclusively so because of the superior knowledge that we've won for ourselves by an endless struggle to assert our reason, our science, our humanity, our extension of knowledge against the priests, against the rabbis, against the mullahs who've always wanted us to consider ourselves as made from dust, or from a clot of blood, according to the Quran, or as the Jews are supposed to pray every morning, at least not female or Gentile. It appeals both to our meanness, our self-centeredness, and our solipsism, and to our masochism. In other words, it's sadomasochistic. I'll put it like this. You're a clot of blood, you're a piece of mud, you're lucky to be alive. God fashioned you for his convenience, even though you're born in filth and sin. And even though every religion that's ever been is distinguished principally by the idea that we should be disgusted by our own sexuality. Name me a religion that does not play upon that fact. So you're lucky to be here, originally sinful and covered in shame and filth as you are. You're a wretched creature. But take heart. The universe is designed with you in mind. And heaven has a plan for you. Ladies and gentlemen, I close by saying, I can't believe there is a thinking person here who does not realize that our species would begin to grow to something like its full height if it left this childishness behind, if it emancipated itself from this sinister, childish nonsense. And I know
my view is this, very few people have that much difficulty thinking of themselves as objects of a divine plan. The great advantage religion has is our own solipsism. It's the same as people who don't really believe in astrology, but they'll take a quick peek to see what's happening to Taurus today. And if it says, well, might be a good time for a flutter on the stock exchange, not to think, hang on, the planets don't really move to determine my investments, but maybe, it's not impossible. It could all be about me. I think about it quite a lot, actually, because I have the same birthday as Thomas Jefferson, April the 13th, except that I don't, because he was born under the old calendar. And I think though it says on his tomb he was born on the 13th of April, he was actually born on something like the 25th of April under the old calendar. I've often wondered how the horoscope people managed the transition, the time when everyone had to change which star sign they were. I dare say it got done easily enough. Religion works for most people because to have people, in a sense, horribly do want it to be true, that they are supervised, that God looks out for them, that they might be rewarded or they might be punished. It has this terrible servile advantage. That's why I consider it to be morally superior to be an atheist, to say I would rather live without that ghastly master-slave mentality.
And no evidence or no event that could change your commitment to that belief.
Well, I can only say that if there was, I'm very relieved to find, having studied what I think of as the best evidence in arguments among physicists, biologists, paleontologists, students of mythology, history, archaeology, and so on, very relieved to find there's no evidence for it at all. If I thought it was true, I would consider myself condemned to live under a tyranny. And I've spent my entire life repudiating that idea and helping, I hope, others to think the same. But there is not a chance, of course. There isn't a single chance that anyone will find that, hey, after all, we can definitely know that a virgin conceived or that a condemned felon walked again. And it's quite absurd for anyone to argue in scientific terms as if any of that is even thinkable. What I don't understand, and I suppose I should close by this, is why anybody should be so contemptuous, I suppose is the word, or so insecure about their own faith as not to call it that. Did you hear him say at any point in this evening, this is my faith, I believe it in spite of the evidence to the contrary. I lay my life on it. I believe I'm redeemed by it. I think I will live eternally because... No, he has no confidence to say anything like that. Instead, he tries to mix it up in an area, scientific inquiry, where he's no more competent than, hey, even I am. And that was where he made his big mistake. Thanks. Some people I know who are atheists will say they wish they could believe it. Some people I know who are former believers say they wish they could have their old faith back. They miss it. I don't understand this at all. I think it's an excellent thing that there's no reason to believe in the absurd propositions I just admittedly rather briefly rehearsed to you. The main reason for this, I think, is that it is a totalitarian belief. It is the wish to be a slave. It is the desire that there be an unalterable, unchallengeable, tyrannical authority who can convict you of thought crime while you are asleep, who can subject you, who must indeed subject you, to a total surveillance around the clock, every waking and sleeping minute of your life, I say of your life, before you're born, and even worse, and where the real fun begins, after you're dead.
Think of it, hundreds and hundreds of years of people proudly earning their keep by lying to children and terrifying them, and saying that because they could do that, they were morally superior to us. Reason, common sense, decency, ordinary decency rebels against this kind of mind-forged manacle, however charmingly or humorously it's expressed. But hell exists in the minds of several people I've spoken to just today on this campus in the intervals of other conversations. For them it's real, and I don't say that it's not. But what I want to show is that it can, if it does exist, nonetheless be abolished, like many other mind-forged manacles and man-made tyrannies that confront us. And in fact, that this belief in a supreme and unalterable tyranny is the oldest enemy of our species, the oldest enemy of our intellectual freedom and our moral autonomy, and must be met, and must be challenged, and must be overthrown.
Because another immoral and sinister thing about religion is that lurking under it at all times, in every one of its versions, is a desire for this life to come to an end, for this poor world to be over. The yearning, the secret death wish that's in all of it, let this be gone, let us move to the next stage, is present at all times, unless it's repudiated, which I invite Dr. McGrath to do. But if he does so, I don't see in what eschatological sense he can claim to remain a Christian. And he can't take it a la carte. If you claim or accept the one version, you have to accept the other.
Religion is our first, that's why I'm so fascinated with it, it's our first version of the truth. It's our first attempt as a species. It's what we tried when we didn't know anything. We didn't know we lived on a spherical planet. We didn't know that our planet revolved around the sun. We didn't know that there were microorganisms that explained disease. We thought diseases came from curses or witches or ill-wishing or devils or dust devils. We didn't know anything from the childish, terrified, ignorant origins of our animal primate species. We come to religion. It's also our first attempt at philosophy, our first attempt at morality, our first attempt at healthcare, actually, but because it was our first, it is our worst. We now have better explanations for all these dreads, and we have cleared up all of these mysteries, yet we still dwell. And in some countries, in some societies, not just dwell, but live under a totalitarian regime that forbids us to think about the progress that has been made, or denies us the knowledge that these advances have in fact occurred. So it has become, where once it probably was an aid to our survival, a really great peril to our continued ability to live as a civilized species.
Everyone in this room is an atheist. Everyone can name a God in which they do not believe. Let them advance the case that the one in which they believe is the superior one. But deism and theism are two quite different things. The deist argument says that there is so much order apparent in nature and in the cosmos and in the universe that it might be unwise to assume that such order has no one interested in ordering or designing it. That assumption might be an unsafe one. The philosopher Paley, in his natural theology, said design implies a designer. He came up with the very famous image of the watch. If you come across a watch, if you're a primitive tribesperson in the Sahara, you may not know what it's for, but you know that it's not a rock or a vegetable. You know it has a purpose, and someone made it that way.